What's going on, guys? With Tower number 9, I mistakenly messed up the first part of this recording, but this is a league match here with my Sabine against Grand Admiral Thrawn. And so on the first turn, I deployed a Green Squadron A-Wing. My opponent deployed Colonel Yularen. We are now on the second turn. I have attacked with the A-Wing. My opponent has attacked with Yularen. Um, I had also used Sabine's ability for 1 damage to each base. I had used it on the previous turn as well. I deploy Leia Defiant Princess, standing up a resource, and use the 2 resources to play an X-Wing. My opponent does have an Emperor's Royal Guard out there that's going to prevent Leia Defiant Princess from attacking the enemy base. I, of course, playing Sabine, trying to just push as much damage to the base as possible here. But I have a open fire in hand that can deal with that Royal Guard. And in the event that my opponent does simply attack with the Royal Guard into Leia Defiant Princess, which would be a reasonable move, I can then potentially defeat the Royal Guard with Sabine. Another option would be, of course, to send Colonel Yularen to defeat Leia. And I don't know what my opponent has in hand. Looks like in this case, Thrawn's ability is going to be used. So I'm going to highlight this in the next video. I highlighted it at the start of this video when I was accidentally not recording, or I was recording something different. But the Thrawn's ability there used to reveal the top card of my deck and exhaust my A-Wing. I'm going to go ahead and take the opportunity to pick off that Royal Guard before it gets a chance to do anything. So open fire being played. Still have a resource, which I'm probably going to be using to play Greedo here. Um, I have a Medal Ceremony as well. My opponent has Yularen attack into my base. I do think this is probably wrong. So Sabine is an aggro deck. Sabine is probably at least arguably the most aggro deck in the game. And against aggro, you sometimes want to race if you're also aggro, if you have like a very fast hand, but in general you want to try and get control of the board. So my opponent deploys a 7th Fleet Defender. In this situation, I think it might have been good to ambush that to take out the X-Wing before it gets a chance to attack. Or to take out the A-Wing and leave the shield on there, since you can resolve the ambush before the shielded. So then I play Greedo, I deploy Sabine, swing in for 3, and then I have a Medal Ceremony, which is going to give an experience token to each of up to 3 rebel units that attack this phase. So 1 for Sabine, 1 for Leia, who I really didn't expect to survive, and 1 for the X-Wing. So now we have a lot of experience on the board, and I'm feeling pretty good about this board state. Opponent only has 13 life left. Energy Conversion Lab not used, but Jeddah City not used yet either. And I am in a relatively decent position. So I have a slightly awkward hand. I have a 2 cost and a 3 cost here. Probably this turn I'm going to play the Fleet Lieutenant only. Thrawn will be able to deploy next round, of course, and he could potentially use his exhaust ability this round. One disadvantage of playing Sabine is that because the deck is so low to the ground, the most expensive stuff in this deck is 3 cost. Thrawn's ability to exhaust something based on the cost of a revealed card is almost always going to be live. So it's a situation where it should be pretty easy for him. In this case, though, my opponent opts to play an overwhelming barrage on the defender. That's going to be 5 total damage. Opts to remove the A-Wing, remove Greedo, and 1 point of damage remaining. Um, Greedo top deck there misses, and then the 1 remaining damage, I believe, is sent to Leia. That will allow Yularen to defeat Leia in 1 attack. Quite reasonable. I play a Fleet Lieutenant and have the Alliance X-Wing attack. Um, it's worth 5 damage there. Would be 2 base +1 for the experience, +2 for the Fleet Lieutenant. So we're going to do a little bit more damage to the base there, over to 17. And this is Sabine can come in for another 4 this turn, and Leia maybe for another 3. The Yularen will probably get a chance to trade with her. Yeah, Yularen trades with Leia here. And now Sabine can hit the enemy base for 4, thanks to her own experience. And enemy base now at 4 remaining hit points. The defender there, um, bit surprising, goes for the base. I think it would have been much better to clear out the X-Wing, though I do also think it is probably just too late for my opponent here. Um, I mean, Sabine can just swing for lethal at this point since I have the initiative, and yeah, that's game. So a relatively quick win there for Sabine, was able to get the aggro power through. My opponent did draw an overwhelming barrage, but it didn't really stabilize the situation that much. I think my opponent could have done better by focusing more on clearing out my units instead of pushing some damage to the base. You're just not really likely going to outrace a Sabine deck. And we are now moving. I'm 1-0, and we're going to move to sideboarding. So in this case, my opponent's playing Thrawn. I'm thinking about these options. Honestly, the stuff that I have on the sideboard here doesn't really feel like it's necessary. I don't feel like I really need shoot first. Don't necessarily really feel like I need infiltrator skill. There aren't any cards that are in my deck that feel like they're totally busted and non-functional against this either. You know, sometimes you have a situation where it's like, oh, I'm playing against Darth Vader. I might want to sideboard out Greedo because Greedo is so vulnerable to Vader's ping. But difficult situation. Okay, so we're gonna go into game two. My opponent also doing some sideboarding here, so we're gonna start us off. My opponent was gonna roll to see you guys first, but I point out they can just have it under these circumstances. And this is an okay hand, so I could lead off with a Lothal Insurgent or with the Partisan Insurgent buff with Wing Leader on the next turn. Could potentially. I have a Surprise Strike in hand, which is something I like to see. Surprise Strike is a key card for this deck. It's basically 3 extra damage to the opponent's base for 2, which is extremely good. It also has good tempo because playing it allows you to attack with a unit at the same time. Um, and I do have Greedo to potentially join up. In this case, my opponent is going to have the initiative, which is a little good for Greedo. There is the chance of being picked off by like ISB agent. Ultimately, this is a good, but not. This is like a quite playable, but by no means like amazing hand. It's conceivable that I should have mulliganed this, looking for something like Sabine Ran Explosives Expert or Green Squadron A-Wing, which I think are better starting units than the Partisan Insurgent. Greedo can be a really good starting unit if paired with Leia Defiant Princess, but I don't have that here. My opponent plays Piet, who is a good counter to Greedo. So I'm going to use the Partisan Insurgent, 2 cost 1/4, while you control another aggression unit. This unit gains grade 2. So the cool thing about the Partisan Insurgent is that the 4 health makes him unusually difficult to kill with early game stuff. You know, if someone has, you know, a 1/4 and then they play a Field Trooper Lieutenant or a Fleet Lieutenant or whatever to send that unit to attack you for 3, that often deals with an early game drop, but the Partisan Insurgent's 4 HP is protected from that. So, you know, a little bit of extra nice defense, and then if I can develop my board with another aggression unit, it will go up to it will gain that raid 2 and be able to do some more damage on the offense. So in this situation, I have drawn a Green Squadron A-Wing, which I can use. So this turn I could play the A-Wing in Greedo. Playing the A-Wing gives essentially a +2 to the Partisan Insurgent. My opponent activates the Energy Conversion Lab to ambush in a Super Laser Technician, dealing 2 damage and readying a resource. That readied resource can now potentially be used with Thrawn's ability to exhaust my guy. Um, I end up deploying the Green Squadron A-Wing anyway. Arguably, I should have attacked here for 1, instead, in the hopes that this would waste my opponent's resource. Um, I think that would probably have been marginally better. Attacking for 1 rather than playing the A-Wing. So by playing the A-Wing, I give the Partisan Insurgent raid 2. But if I had just swung in, that would have been a scenario where I could have gotten an additional point of damage. And sometimes those 1 point of damage really matter. My opponent hits my base with Admiral Piet, and I then deploy Greedo. So Piet can of course attack and defeat Greedo in one shot if he wants, but there is the chance that he will himself be defeated by the ability. Additionally, him doing that means that he won't be available to attack one of the other units. Um, Greedo is easy to defeat, but at the very least might use an action of my opponent's. So this turn, I can potentially do Leia, Defiant Princess, stand up a resource, play the Wing Leader. That seems like a pretty good set of plays. I could use that to use that on Sabine herself. Buffing Sabine with a Wing Leader is a pretty solid play in my opinion. Might be a little annoying for my opponent to remove, and more resilient to the exhaust effects than other stuff. The Thrawn exhaust effect really good against these cheap units, even if I upgrade them with attachments or experience. So I keep saying attachments. They were called attachments in L5R. They are called upgrades in this game. But even if I use upgrades such as my, I believe the only upgrade I'm playing in this version of the deck is Snapshot Reflexes with the Infiltrator skill as a sideboard card. So my opponent ambushes in Agent Callus. I believe picks off Greedo, and Greedo misses his top deck to take Callus out with him. Not a reliable ability. Sometimes it's nice to have, of course. Better to have it than not, but not a reliable ability. Right. My opponent gets a card draw because a another unique unit has been defeated for Agent Callus. So in this situation, I do have the opportunity to just attack the enemy base for 3 using my Partisan Insurgent, which I will then do, landing a 3 damage hit. Then I'll be the Agent Callus play here, while it did take out a unit of mine, the unit that was taken out just isn't really all that valuable. The card draw probably isn't all that important. We're really in a very aggro situation here. So overall, my opponent having spent their whole turn to take out one unit and have a unit left on the board is like pretty fine by me. If you think of it about it in this sense, Greedo is a 1 cost, Agent Callus is a 5 cost, so resource wise, I'm way ahead on that exchange. I use Leia Defiant Princess to stand up a resource. Then I play Wing Leader and I deploy Sabine. I play Wing Leader, I buff Sabine, and Sabine swings in there for some more damage. And once again, I find myself looking at what seems like a pretty favorable board. In this situation, I'm not going to resource at all, so I have another Greedo, I have a Snapshot Reflexes, and I have a Surprise Strike. I'm probably looking to close the game this turn if possible. Um, my opponent currently on 11 life, and I have 5 damage from Sabine, 2 damage from Leia, probably 3 damage from the Insurgent, that's 10, and then 3 from the A-Wing, 2 from the Wing Leader. So I have more than lethal on the board right now. Plus, I have a Surprise Strike and a Snapshot Reflexes in hand, so there's a good chance I can win the game this turn, depending on what my opponent does. That being said, the game is definitely not over. There are other things that could happen, but I'm feeling pretty confident about this situation as the aggro player. I kind of will get a chance to deploy Thrawn this turn, which is, probably nice to have, but I think his impact in the game is going to arrive too late for the Imperial base here. We'll have to see. Okay, so let's see what happens here. Okay, so we have a Emperor's Royal Guard hitting the field. Um, let's see what happens. See what happens next. So that is going to be a Sentinel here, thanks to Admiral Piet being an official. So I decide that I'm just gonna have Sabine clear the Emperor's Royal Guard. Her ability does 1 damage to the base with this attack, and she additionally has a she can make that attack and still survive, be another threat on the board that my opponent will have to deal with at one point or another. Um, whereas my other units there would be defeated. Leia would not do enough damage. I could conceivably use the snapshot reflexes to have the Partisan Insurgent defeat the Royal Guard, but it doesn't strike me as incredibly worth it. Thrawn himself now deploys. I'm going to surprise strike the insurgent there into the base. I want to reserve the snapshot reflexes, and it's probably going to stay around a little longer. With only 2 HP left, any of these ground units can just be defeated if my opponent so chooses. So I'm hoping to use the snapshot reflexes on a more valuable unit. So if I play it on if I use snapshot reflexes on the A-wing, I will actually win the game immediately. That would be 4 damage. But good chance that A-wing is going to get exhausted by Thrawn's ability here. So Thrawn attacks, defeating Leia, Defiant Princess, and revealing a card here. Reveals a card from the top of his own deck. It is a 7th Fleet Defender, and that is going to exhaust the A-wing. But I'm still feeling very confident about this scenario because my opponent is so low. I'm going to snapshot reflexes with the wing leader. So snapshot reflexes is an attachment that gives +1/+1, and when you play it on a unit, you may then immediately attack with that unit. So then 3 damage attack into the enemy base. A 7th Fleet Defender deploys, but it is too little too late here. I'm going to take the initiative, and nothing really my opponent can do at this point. Even with, you know, Sabine currently has 4 life remaining, so Callus could defeat Sabine, but the Partisan Insurgent would remain on the board, and all I have to do is have any of my 4 units remaining on the board in order to attack and destroy the enemy base at the start of the next turn. So ultimately, another victory for Sabine. I end up going 2-0 and winning this. I end up going 2-0 and winning this league match. This is an example, in my opinion, of this is an example of how Sabine can be really scary with a slower deck. My opponent has a Thrawn deck that has some good it has some good tricks, it has some efficient units, but the overall pace is not really fast enough for what I'm doing, and I'm able to kind of overwhelm those defenses and win relatively soon. Like, yeah, my opponent was gaining board control. I don't really have a good way to deal with the 8 HP Grand Admiral Thrawn. Um, I don't really have, Callus could have traded for Sabine, and then all that would be left would be Piet and Thrawn against my wounded Partisan Insurgent. Um, and then in the space arena, things were a little better for me, but that 7th Fleet Defender could still potentially take down both my ships. But it's just not really on time. It's not really fast enough because by that point, yeah, the board is going in my opponent's favor, but I've basically already won the game just with the damage that I pushed to the base, and that's kind of the scary thing about Sabine. You can do a lot of damage pretty fast once stuff starts adding up. And yeah, so that's a relatively quicker video, guys, but that is a league match with my Sabine versus a Thrawn, and ultimately a victory for Sabine. Thanks to you guys for watching. The Sabine deck list is in the comments below, as is, or is in the video description below, rather, as is a link to the league in question if you want to take part yourself. But that's going to do it for this one, and we'll be back later with some more Star Wars Unlimited content. Thanks for watching, guys.